There's something you begin noticing once you spend enough time around tea culture. Tea drinkers tend to love books. Not always, of course, but often enough that it starts feeling less like coincidence and more like connection. You see it in tea shops with overflowing bookshelves, in quiet corners of bookstores where someone is steeping a cup beside a stack of novels, in journals filled with handwritten notes beside a teapot still warm from the afternoon. Tea and books seem to belong together naturally, and I've often wondered why that is. I think part of the answer is simple. Both tea and books ask us to slow down, and slowing down has become increasingly rare. Most of modern life pushes us towards speed, quick reactions, constant updates, infinite scrolling, always moving toward the next thing. Tea moves differently. A kettle begins to warm. Leaves unfold slowly in water. Steam rises. You wait, not for very long, but long enough to notice something. The pace changes. Your breathing softens a little. Your attention returns. And books invite us into that same rhythm. Reading requires patience, not because reading is difficult, but because deep reading asks us to stay present long enough for ideas to unfold gradually. A good book doesn't rush itself, and neither does good tea. I think that's why tea often creates the perfect environment for reading. Tea creates atmosphere, not just flavor, atmosphere, a sense of quiet, a feeling of stillness, a small separation from the noise outside. And in that kind of space, books become easier to enter, not just informationally, but emotionally. You stop scanning. You begin paying attention. There's also something deeply tactile about both experiences. Tea is physical. The warmth of the cup, the sound of pouring water, the aroma rising before the first sip. Books are physical too. The texture of paper, the weight of pages, a bookmark left halfway through a chapter, a worn cover that shows years of rereading. Neither experience exists entirely on a screen, and I think many people today are hungry for that. Physical experiences, grounded experiences, things that ask us to participate rather than simply consume. Tea and books both belong to that world. Historically, the connection between tea and reading goes back centuries. Tea houses became places of philosophy, poetry, scholarship, and conversation. In China, tea culture evolved alongside literature and intellectual life. In Japan, tea became deeply connected with aesthetics, contemplation, and intentional living. Even in Europe, tea became associated with reading rooms, letter writing, and long conversations that unfolded slowly over time. Tea has long accompanied reflective life, and maybe it still does. I also think tea drinkers are often drawn toward depth, not necessarily complexity, but depth. The kind of person willing to spend time learning subtle differences between teas is often the same kind of person willing to spend time inside a thoughtful book. Tea teaches attention. You notice temperature, timing, aroma, texture, small changes between steepings. Books reward that same attentiveness. The more present you are, the richer the experience becomes. And maybe that's especially important right now, because many people feel exhausted by fragmented attention. We skim articles, half-watch videos, read notifications instead of paragraphs, move constantly between screens. But tea gently interrupts that rhythm, and books do too. Together, they create a different kind of experience entirely, one built around focus instead of distraction. I've also noticed that tea encourages rereading. And that matters. In tea culture, the second steeping is often better than the first. Sometimes the third steeping reveals something entirely new. Books work that way too. A passage read years later suddenly means something different. A sentence you once overlooked becomes important. A familiar book deepens over time. Tea teaches us that returning is valuable. Not everything meaningful is meant to be consumed once and discarded. Some things reveal themselves slowly. There's also something comforting about the pairing itself. A rainy afternoon, a chair near a window, a quiet room, a warm cup of tea beside a well-loved book. It feels timeless somehow, almost resistant to the pace of modern life. Not aggressively, not nostalgically, just quietly. Tea and books both remind us that some experiences become richer when we stop rushing through them. And maybe that's ultimately the connection. Both tea and books cultivate attention. Both reward patience. Both invite reflection. And both create small spaces where we can think more clearly, feel more grounded, and reconnect with a slower, more human rhythm of life. So maybe today's episode is also an invitation. The next time you make tea, leave your phone in another room for a little while. Choose a real book, or a journal, or even a poem. Sit quietly for 10 minutes. Let the tea slow the moment down. And notice how different reading feels when your attention finally has room to settle. Thank you for listening to TeaMinded. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to follow the podcast and share it with someone who loves tea, books, or simply a slower way of living. And until next time, put the kettle on, open a good book, and stay tea-minded.